All right, okay. So I start this course with chapter 6, which is the second unit technically. The second unit is about historical globalization, it's about the past. The first unit is about more modern stuff, so I find it a bit strange that the ordering, so I actually do the history first, okay? So if you're looking to switch out of my class, I suggest you do that sooner rather than later, because 2 weeks from now, you're gonna miss like a chapter or two from another course in this course, and it's gonna be a mess, okay? So just a heads up. Okay, Unit 2, well, related issue 2, the impacts of historical globalization. So we're focusing on two main questions. To what extent should contemporary society respond to the legacies of historical globalization? We're gonna learn about historical globalization. Anyone know what the word contemporary means? Anyone have an idea? Contemporary. Anyone? Okay, well, what's temporary?
It's like, it's not permanent.
Not permanent, right? So contemporary society is kind of modern, it's new, it's recent, and potentially not permanent. I mean, very few things are permanent, right? The embarrassment you experienced as a child, probably more permanent, right? Okay, whatever you were doing earlier, like shooing away a ghost, right? That's embarrassing, okay? Allegedly. How much should the people of today accommodate for the people affected by historical globalization, right? And that's kind of what this course looks at. So, long time ago, a couple hundred years ago, particularly out of Europe, a lot of people left. They came to North America. Some bad things happened. I'm going to teach you about those bad things, okay? Some good things happen, right? Because look, we have electricity, we have clean running water, we have nice roads, healthcare, okay? Question that this unit, this course looks at is, what should we do today about what happened in the past? Okay. So we have some images here, so maybe you can recognize some of the continents and what's going on here as well when we look at that issue. Okay. So I'll print off another document. It has some questions that will help you to understand the material that we're going through. Okay, that will be separate to your notes. But key issue, to what extent does cultural conflict affect people? Okay, so when two different cultures come into contact and there's issues, there's disagreements, how does that impact people? All right, some of us how many of you were born in a different country? Right. Okay, so you grew up maybe for a short while somewhere else, you moved to Canada. What impact does that have, right? For people who are born and raised here, when you meet people from a different cultural group, how do you interact with them? How does that go? How do you acknowledge and manage the differences between groups, right? Lots of similarities over there. Okay. Can you name any historical examples of cultural conflict? Okay, two different groups coming into contact and having some sort of conflict. Could be violent, it could be non-violent. Any ideas? Any time in history. Okay, a war between which two groups of people? Germans and? Yeah, Germans in the world very recently, 1940s. Can we think of any other cultural conflicts? Come on, grade 10s, you guys scratch your noggin for this one, right? There you go. She's scratching her noggin. Any ideas? We got ideas back there. 9/11. Maybe there might have been some other issues there. Okay. Russia and Ukraine, right? Could be a bit of a cultural conflict, right? There's different ideologies there as well.
Is it still cultural conflict just one-sided?
Absolutely, right? Like just because one group shows up and just curb stomps the other group doesn't mean it's not a conflict, right? World War I, but yeah, maybe there was different European nations, but it was still Europe as a whole that was fighting, right? Afghanistan and Russia, right? Russia invades, there's different cultures there, they have different ways of doing things. Okay, here's an example, historical. Have you heard of this this historical monument, this site called the Great Wall of China?
Oh yeah, I've never heard of it.
Okay. who are they trying to protect themselves against?
Everyone. No.
Again, you just say, the Mongols. Who said that? Someone back there. Okay, the Mongols. That's correct, right? Those are two different cultural groups. They came into contact. There's a lot of conflict. Okay. Another one would be historically the Germans and the Romans. Anyone seen the movie Gladiator? Excellent movie. At the start of the movie, who are they fighting? The Germans. And they call them barbarians. Okay. 300, excellent example, right? The Persian army invades Greece. These are two very different cultures, and there's a conflict. Okay, so those are some examples. Are there so modern examples we came up with? Russia and Ukraine, right? These are modern cultural conflicts. Is there any other conflict? They don't necessarily have to be between two separate ethnic groups of people, right? It could be two different ideas, two different cultural ideas.
The Civil War?
It could be the Civil War, right? That's more modern as well. You're talking about the American one?
Yeah.
Okay. So the American one, the North and the South had different ideas of how the government should function, what role they should play. They also differed on the topic of slavery as well, right? Although that kind of gets confused quite a bit by people. Okay.
Literally anything that includes politics.
Yeah, there's a lot of political conflict, right? And these kind of are two different cultural groups, right? I mean, there might be a cultural conflict going on between the culture of the grade 10s and the grade 9s at this school. Because many of you have asked me, Mr. Kawaja, why are they so emo? You know who you are. Okay, let's move on. So, a worldview. I was just talking to my grade 9s about this. A worldview is a way of interpreting the present. It could be understanding the past and how you imagine the future. So there's a variety of different worldviews, right? Some are more positive, and they say that, hey, the world's going to be okay. Do you not have this in your notes?
You do, it's already
Okay, maybe you don't have this particular slide. That's strange.
This is very odd.
Okay, whatever. We'll just start with this. There's discussion questions here, anyways. So take a look at these two separate worldviews. This is in your textbook. Should be around page 116. The way you two are going to be the first people I move. Okay. So over here, your textbook presents you an Aboriginal worldview. Okay, it's very different than the European worldview it presents. Okay. In what ways do these worldviews conflict? Okay, if you have your textbook, feel free to go to page 116 and look at this image as well. What's that?
What does it say?
Where do you think this worldview comes from? It's a pyramid. At the top you have humans. Next you have birds and animals. Then you have fish, reptile, insects. And you have plants, flowers, trees.
But a bird is an animal, and a reptile is an animal as well.
Sure, but there are things that crawl. They're like crawling things. Okay, that's a very specific word I'm using. Anyone have an idea where this worldview might come from? Say that again? Medieval times, right? Where did they base that belief system from?
The pyramid.
Come on, kids, we're at a
Hierarchy.
Catholic school.
Catholic hierarchy.
So in the Bible, if you read the book of Genesis, the way it lays out creation, right? Like human beings are at the top, right? And so the way the biblical story goes in Genesis is that Adam, the first human, he named all these other creatures and animals and things that crawl, right? And so next, you have birds, and birds are pretty okay because they fly in the sky. That's kind of like where heaven is, right? Physically speaking. Then you have animals that roam the earth, right? Bigger animals that you can see, and those are nice too. But below them, you have things like fish. So they're in the sea. They're a little bit underneath. They're below, right? And they're in a more, let's say, chaotic realm. Because how many of you feel comfortable in the water?
Hell no.
Right? Yeah, that's typically the response. How many of you, when you're in, like, how many of you have gone to the, to the lake, you're out in the water, and your foot touches something slimy, and you're like, whoa, what's that, right? You immediately retract your leg.
Things are sharp.
You've never been in the water.
I said I
No,
was
her,
not
her,
water.
her.
Oh, okay.
She's looking at me like I've never experienced this. Okay? So the water is a little bit lower symbolically. And so that's why fish are there. Reptiles and insects, these are things that crawl and slither on the floor. And the Bible lays it out that they're a little bit lower. Right? They're like right on the ground level. And then I don't quite know where plants, flowers, and trees would be. The Bible doesn't necessarily talk about the story. Sure, they're taller than us, right? But maybe they seem less sentient, right? Like when you look at a tree, how many of you think that that tree is alive?
Is it moving?
So, kind of. Right? So you might not think it's alive like, like your buddy beside you is, right? But it's not like a rock, right? There's some life in it. Okay. Where do you see humans on the left side? The bottom left, right? Humans are right here. And in the other worldview, in the what's that?
Why did you say moon?
So some indigenous cultures still like they might view the sun and the moon as spirits, and so they're also beings and entities within the realm of existence, right? And so here you have a very clear idea of the order of things, right? Like you have humans on top, right? So like how that works in a school, you got principals, teachers, senior